In my mind, agencies are a tool to extend the working team of the brand, right? And so it's always my goal to surround myself and my team with sort of some best-in-class partners that bring that specific subject matter expertise that I need to the table.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, and this podcast is brought to you by You Should Talk To and total sponsor Ponies Up. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for marketing and tech needs, because finding the right agency is a pain in the ass. I am super excited to be joined today by Jennifer Chasteen, CMO of Synergy HomeCare. Jennifer, how are you?
I am awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. You just got back from a significantly less exciting event than what you're doing today with me here. Where were you last week? I just found this out.
Oh, I was, out of Google at a marketing innovation summit with my agency partners at Location 3, and we had a great week.
Awesome.
Now I'm back.
Well, thank you for joining us. You've had some interesting experience over the course of your career to get you to this point. You've had some franchise food experience. You're at a different sort of franchise now. Can you give us the Cliff's Notes? How'd you get here?
For sure. So, as you mentioned, I've got over 20 years in the food service business. Wow. I am still young, I promise. Iconic brands like Domino's.
Make no guesses on this podcast.
Like Domino's, Church's Chicken, etc. And 20 years in, I made a pivot about a year ago to my current role at Synergy HomeCare. And I'll tell you, I love the food business. Never thought I would leave the food business. But really, the common thread there is the franchise model and that unique set of experience that it brings to the table. It's just a very different dynamic. But my skill set is sort of in the range of being this transformational business leader who happens to be a marketer. And so my marketing specialty is all about leveraging that brand strategy as sort of the leading edge of what happens with the business and ultimately generating, the revenue. And so innovation is my thing, and optimizing processes, unlocking revenue growth across the broader enterprise. And so that led me to Synergy, which is in the non-medical in-home care space. Say that quickly 3 times. But essentially, this is an exploding space in terms of growth. Because if you think about it, our primary target is seniors. We serve all ages, of course, but the idea that you're receiving personal care or assistance in your own home, whether you happen to be a senior, you're recovering from illness, from injury, from surgery, etc. But as the boomers age, 10,000 of them age in every single day. And, that creates a demand space unlike anything out there, if you will, a very constant stream of demand. And we are the fastest growing franchisor in this space nationally, and we've got about 400 locations across 40 states. So the opportunity there is to really transform the business and take us to the next level of growth while, impacting the lives of so many in the communities that we serve.
A worthy cause to market for. Let's talk a little bit about that. You talked about, the franchising model being, or the franchise model being the common thread. What sort of nuances do you think exist regarding, franchise marketing in general? And, do you see a common thread between food and where you're at now, or it's, an entirely different ballgame essentially?
No, it's so interesting. I was with about 30 other brands last week, as I mentioned at the beginning, and we all share the same set of, issues, if you will. There's certain
verticals?
things that connect to the different, that connect to the specifics of the business, but the general, considerations are the same. And really, it's about you have to have an enterprise strategy as you would with any brand, but you've got to be able to activate it and carry it to the front lines locally. And, by nature, you've got franchisees who are entrepreneurs. They want to participate in the process. And at the same time, there's so much that can be learned from our frontline operators, if you will. And so it becomes extraordinarily important to build those relationships, to listen, to learn from them. And at the end of the day, the smartest or sharpest strategy won't find success if you don't achieve that credibility, trust, and buy-in to your vision for your brand.
Sure. You've worked with some huge global brands as well, household name brands, I would say, Churches, Domino's, stuff like that. What's your overall opinion on agencies? They get a bad rep from some people, I presume, at brands like that, though. You lean heavily on them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, in my mind, agencies are a tool to extend the working team of the brand, right? And so whether it's a big brand or a little brand, that's essentially the role. And, it's always my goal to surround myself and my team with sort of some best in class partners that bring, that specific subject matter expertise that I need to the table. It could be digital ad tech, it could be creative development, it could be public relations, what have you. But what I have seen over time is I don't believe a generalist type of approach really suits the business over time as needs change or the needs of the consumer, change. And so I have really been a proponent of an integrated agency team, compiling a set of resources and, that connect directly to the KPIs of my business. And, so I think with that in mind, you get what you do, right? So, to make sure that you're scoped appropriately and that you're checking in over time to make sure that you're aligned in what you're attempting to accomplish for your business. It makes it more efficient and more useful to me as a brand leader.
Sure. I'm guessing, I could be wrong, that Synergy is not as much of a household name as brands like Churches and Domino's. Do you think that presents a challenge, a bit of an opportunity, or somewhere in between for you as a marketing leader?
So, it's interesting, and I think it all depends on the outlook. For me, I'm all about blue sky and an opportunity space. And so what really gets me fired up as a marketer is to be able to innovate and to transform. And so to have that, blank canvas in terms of this is a brand that's 20 something years old, so relatively young, in a category that is not a mature category. Whereas if you think about pizza or fried chicken, certainly wonderful household brand names, but more mature categories, right?
Sure.
So for me, having that opportunity to really, lay down those puzzle pieces and again, figure out what are the strategies that are going to support growth of the enterprise and deliver against the strategic imperatives of the business, that gets me pretty excited as a marketer. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, I'm gonna bring you back down to earth and ask you a question that I assume doesn't make you as excited. I ask everybody on the podcast, like, how many times a week? It's like usually every 12 seconds is the answer. Are you getting hit up by vendors, agencies on LinkedIn, email? Hopefully not as many phone calls, all that sort of stuff. Is it just a constant stream of sales related materials?
It is, and I've been, I guess, stunned to see, obviously when you take on a new role, I'm just about a year in and people are like, oh, well, have you considered this? And, you need to try, X, Y, and Z. But the amount of sort of cold calls and the lack of just basic information about what my business is when I'm contacted, that I don't know why it surprises me, but it does surprise me, every day when I'm like, do you know why you contacted me? Because, that's something that we do. Either way, I'm unlikely to respond to a cold introduction in the first place. But, if you don't know how to add value to my business at the most basic level, bye. It's not working for me.
Is there anything that a cold outreach can do to at least get your attention, or probably not if that's the case? I mean, your title, truthfully, is, one of the most sought after in the game. And it's funny that you brought up, like, once you get a new job, because, there's so many people, at least on LinkedIn, who preach like, oh, it's such a good indicator of them needing like new vendors and technology. And I think everybody overcorrected and like everybody did it. So now you get hit up by like 1,000 people the day you start a new job. Like you're just like ready to jump in. Is there
Right.
anything somebody can do to stand out in those scenarios? Like if it is cold truly and you've never heard of them or the vendor or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they have any, what's the word, sort of any case studies or things that they're able to provide, I've had a few people reach out to me from time to time that, hey, we can show you how our tool works or how whatever, with some basic information or what have you. So those type of engagements would be more compelling to me in terms of like, hey, there's an opportunity to connect and, we'll provide you some type of complimentary something that might benefit your business. Those tend to be the most successful, in my opinion.
Sure. When you do need to outsource, either vendor or agency, where are you typically starting your search? I interviewed Kathleen Booth a couple episodes ago, who's SVP of marketing at Pavilion now, and she had a kind of viral-ish post on LinkedIn that said community is now the new Google. People are going to their actually formalized online communities or their peers and kind of creating their shortlist there before doing anything else. Is that the case for you?
It tends to be, the beauty of sort of being in this space, as long as I have been and all in the same city for that matter, you meet a lot of people along the trajectory of your career. And so that network is expansive and people's careers take different paths, over time. I can't tell you the number of colleagues I've worked with over the years that, now they have their own shop or they lead something completely different that's complementary to my business needs at this moment. And so those relationships and, sort of the set of connections that those people have really does lead to a pretty robust type of perspective that you can get when you know kind of what you're looking for. I think the bigger issue is, especially when you take on a new brand, is defining what you're looking for, right?
Sure.
It's, you do have that blank canvas and you do have to say, well, gosh, where do I start? So sometimes it takes a minute. So, that day one where you got that cold call or whatever that was, you're not ready to onboard that regardless because, you have some thinking to do about your business and, you want to determine what big rocks am I moving first, right? And how am I going to address these things? So, but it does tend to be the network. I'm involved with a number of groups as well. Brand Innovators is one of them. I found that to be a really strong resource in terms of people I may not know that I can then be connected to.
Gotcha. In general, what are you looking for from an agency or vendor, if you had to sum it up?
So, to me, the center of any relationship, whether it's with a franchisee or an agency or, what have you, it's sort of this communication and, transparency, right? So for me, I think, my partners would tell you if they were talking to you at this moment, that I am a straight shooter and I am looking to them to, help me solve real business problems. And so I'm very forthcoming with sharing as much information, data, what have you, to try and figure out what the path forward is. And so, or where we may be struggling or where, I personally may be struggling and need, further resource or counsel. And so I think that being proactive in that communication and really seeking to understand my business and, sort of mirroring that back is what's led to, some of the strongest relationships that I've been able to build with my partners.
Sure. And you touched on it earlier, talking about like agencies who are not full service and a little more specialized and stuff like that. I've seen a big shift in that as well, especially since COVID. With a company your size dealing with 400 units, what's most important to you? Are you looking for category expertise? The size of the agency matter in terms of just scale? Like what's super important to you, even once you've determined here's a few, specialized agencies that do this one or two things really well? How do you kind of think through that?
So for me, it's about, again, being nimble to the needs of the business. So it really has kind of come down to specialty being sort of the primary, right? And it's not specialty in the home care space. It's
Sure.
specialty in my case, it's a lead generation model. There are not retail locations per se. So the website and, the digital footprint is king. That's where, consumers are going to meet my brand. And so a lot of my engagements have been centered around excelling, in that space in particular.
No, that makes total sense. Without naming any names, can you think of like a really negative agency experience that you've had in the past? I usually start with a positive one, but we'll do negative today. We can flip to the high note after. But yeah, without naming anybody, can you think of in your career, something that, not the best experience or totally horrific would be even better for content's sake?
Again, and I don't even know that I would call it negative. I think it's that you become misaligned or you are misaligned, right? And so it's impossible for your partner to come to the table with what you're looking for if there's not sort of that clear, transparent communication and that connectivity in terms of, okay, well, how are we doing, right? So the idea of reevaluating that scope, if that's what the case needs to be, or also I'm fond of the performance review process as well, just where, you mutually can help each other be better because it's not one-sided. I have to be a good client in order for you to be a good partner. And I certainly strive to be that. So if there's something that you're not getting from me, I need to know that as well. But that's what it's tended to be is, it's just sort of you're scoped in a certain way or you're misconnected or misaligned on what the most important things are that you're working on and what the needs are. Depending on where you are, you may be light years away from something that your partner's very passionate about, but it doesn't make sense for your business at this time. And you have to kind of just be like, okay, let's put a pin in this. We need to focus on,
Sure.
what's in front of us here in the near midterm.
Sure. I don't want to hold you to the fire, but do you have a specific you can think of? You don't have to name anybody or like the specifics around it, but more in like what's a situation where you've had to get rid of an agency even, and like what was kind of like the tipping point?
Yeah, I think the tipping point, and again, I'm not trying to be vague here, I promise, it's outgrowing your partner.
Talk some shit.
You can no longer, meet the needs of the business, or you lack the sophistication or the, that next level, whatnot. That has been really, in my experience, the biggest reason for parting ways. It hasn't been, oh, you stink and, we're just very unhappy with you, period. It's been more about like, hey, we need this and you're here and we don't see your ability to help us get there.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I hear a lot of the horror stories just based on what I do naturally. And it's very rare that it's about the actual work. I very rarely hear like it didn't go well because like the work was not good. It's usually like 75 other things. The relationship sucked. The communication fell, like expectations like you managed. We were misaligned on scope. The team we were working with pre-sale was not the team we were working with once we actually engaged. So I find it interesting that I virtually never hear anything about the actual capabilities. Like, hey, they delivered something and it sucked. Like we hated what they actually delivered. It's very rarely that.
Yeah. I mean, it just, again, I think it depends on how you're using your resource, right? And, if you're not aligned or the need changes, that's been my experience. And I think that from a service perspective, like you're just not even going to get out of the gate if that's really what the problem is. Like that, that's going to have to be corrected very early on,
Do you think it can be salvaged once things have gone south?
I mean, if both parties are willing to work on it, I think some of the harder things that I've seen over my career has been, hey, we just don't like this team member or team leadership or, what have you. Like that's a harder solve because you may not have sort of a plug and play leader that can now come in and take this piece of business and carry it forward. And so if you end up with a rotten apple or, just somebody that can't lead the business in the way that you need to. That's the bigger point of departure, probably, just in the sense of that's a hard one to overcome.
Sure. On the flip side, also without naming anybody in particular, can you think of really positive experiences you've had with agencies or vendors and what made that such a positive experience? I'm interested to hear if it's the work here as well or more the relationship side.
I think that the work is important, but there are other things that are actually more important that the work will naturally come along, if you will.
You don't get to do the work if you don't do the other stuff well.
Well, exactly. And so I am not one of the marketers who is seeking to do my agency's specialty. That's why they're working with me. And so I've selected them because they're the best at what they do. And we have the opportunity to do great things together. And so learning about my business and being proactive around my needs is the absolute number one thing that helps me. Because when you're moving a million miles an hour, or, you've taken on a new brand or a new role, you have very important things that you have to get accomplished very quickly. And, you want them to be strategic and well thought out, but at the same time, you have to be bold and you have to move quickly. You don't have the opportunity to sit around and contemplate for the first year, oh, well, what am I going to do? You got to go. And so you want to do that in as informed a way as possible. And having a partner that helps you be so is fantastic. And it's a real game changer.
No, I totally agree. That's like my hot take opinion is the work doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is, of course, the work matters, but you don't get to do any of the work if you're not really good at the relationship, the pitch, making somebody trust you via capabilities and all that sort of stuff. So the work is the second part of it.
Agree.
With the nuance in your business and just marketing in general, what are you most bullish on and excited about in the space at the moment? There's NFTs and all of that stuff going on. Web3 is a very hot word these days. You just got back from an innovation conference. Events are back, it seems. What are you most excited about?
So it's interesting. I'm in a space of more of the fundamentals right now. So, some of the shinier objects, I should say, don't necessarily really float me right now because it's just like, that's not how I'm thinking about my business. It's cool, but it's just not how I'm thinking about my business. But I said to my colleagues last week, having not attended an event in forever, I was just like, I'm stupidly excited to be here with you today because, the idea of being back at real events, networking with real people is great. And it really filled my tank last week. So I'll lean on that for the purposes of our chat here because, some of the more leading edge tech is just not where I'm at right now.
I'm with you. It keeps me, makes me exhausted reading it. There's just too much. That's why I think marketing your role is so hard.
Then it creates anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I got to get in on this. And, no, actually, you really don't. Not right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I see so many people like when something new comes out or a new network or platform or stuff, like everybody flocks. I'm like, you don't have to be everywhere. I just find it hard to believe when I see some of the brands participating in some of that, but maybe that's why I'm not a CMO,
I am a bit of an observationalist, right? Like I am paying attention. I am doing a ton of reading about it. I am watching, I'm learning and I'm educating myself. But at the same time, I'm also thinking about, what are my filters for my near, mid, and ultimately long-term plan? And I'll put a pin in it again and, come back to it, if it's not hitting the mark right now.
What keeps you up at night from a marketing and business standpoint?
So, it's interesting in, talking to my broader franchise marketing contingent there, no matter the business, we all sort of share one similar challenge, and that is wage and labor impacts, right? Really boring stuff, but it's legitimate. And in my line of business, especially when you're entrusting the care of your loved one in their home, you want to know that you have a really quality person coming into that home and providing that care. Caregivers are hourly workers. And, the demand shows no sign of abating in terms of for the services. And so having those qualified caregivers, hiring them, retaining them is super important. And so I would say for the first time in my brands, not only being the provider of choice, but being the employer of choice is really an important area of marketing. Our marketing plan is we have to be able to appeal to employees in addition to consumers.
That's tough. I don't envy. That's a lot. That would keep me up I've got plenty that keeps me up at night. I feel like that would keep me up at night even more. That's that was the final marketing related question. We'll do a little rapid fire here on some fun ones before we end here. What was your very first job, like as a teenager or college or whenever you had your first job?
So true story, and I think that this is hilarious because it ended up being like what I did my entire career is I worked in the food service or dietary department of a nursing home. I'm not kidding. I'm full circle. I was a chef's helper in the kitchen and I, prepared the trays and did all the things. And so I just think that that's so funny. It's just the combination of food and care.
I was going to say, normally my follow-up question is, do you think that prepares you for what you're doing now in any capacity? And I'm assuming the answer is, yeah, I've been waiting for this moment my entire life.
My entire life. No, I've worked in and eaten in a lot of restaurants over my career. So, everybody's got to eat.
Is it weird? This just popped in my head. Is it weird? Maybe not weird is the right word. Is it just an interesting thing to be marketing something that is typically like, not the most fun experience of someone else and stuff like that? How do you guys approach that? Like the, just being careful with what you say and like all that sort of stuff with like the business goals. Is that something that comes up plenty?
Yeah, because it is interesting because, people are contacting us because they need help now.
Right.
Right. Mom's had a stroke. Dad is getting released from the hospital and we don't have, anybody to help him out with things around the house. And he's not ready to care for himself while he recovers,
Sure.
So it literally is, the need is primarily driven by a life event of some kind. Right.
Sure.
And so that said, it's rather acute in that moment. And it's not a joyous occasion, it's a stressful occasion. And so I think that it goes back to, sort of your DNA as a brand. And, for us, it's all about providing that sort of sense of ease as people are navigating, what can be a very complicated situation. And so we tend to be aspirational in our perspective in that the care being the primary and really leaning into the confidence that you can have knowing that your loved one is, going to be in good hands and the peace of mind that affords you, again, as you navigate a really complicated scenario, most likely. So we try and be joyful in that approach because I don't think being maudlin about it is really going to, have anybody feeling better, but the realities are the reality and not sugarcoating it, but definitely leaning into the more aspirational side of how you're going to feel from our care.
Sure. I normally ask, what would your death row meal be? But I've been told from my last interviewee that's a morbid way of saying it. So I assume no one would ever be on death row. But what would your last meal be if you had to pick?
Having had, again, 20 plus years in food, including like all the innovation and products and all that great stuff. I don't know if I can choose. I got to tell you, it probably involves sushi, really, really, really good sushi. And then I would probably accompany it with some French fries and it with some ice cream.
Sushi, French fries, and ice cream. That may be the best answer we've gotten so far. I think that might be mine as well. Sushi, I'd throw in
I have a rule, when I'm on vacation with my kids, I'm like, we have to have French fries or ice cream every day because
I have to have ice cream literally every day. I'm kidding.
Gotta live, man.
I have ice cream every night. I'm being serious. It tells my body, like, we're done for the day. Like, just have this ice cream.
Exactly. That is like the ritual, man.
I'm with you. And then the final question, who's someone who inspires you?
I'm really a pain in the ass today, Daniel.
I was going to say, you don't have any answers for me. What's going on?
I have no answers for you.
I want to just go
dodging
talking some shit. Tell me some more negative stories.
I'm dodging and weeding you.
Yeah, I was going to say. It's a very politically correct episode.
Why are we being so complicated? But no, so here's the deal. Like, it's not so much individuals, right? Like,
Okay.
I'm an insanely curious person.
Okay.
I read, I follow, and to me, I'm always like, anything about disruption, anything about, people doing things differently and solving problems we didn't know we had. But I don't know. I just feel like the world has become such that no one figure can be Yeah, I don't feel that. I would rather learn about something, to be quite honest.
Okay, totally fair. You've been my cagiest guest so far. This is a real challenge, for me.
So do over.
Yeah, let's just scrap the whole thing, and we can just start over. I'll ask you all the same questions and force you to answer. But no, this was wonderful and super insightful regardless. Where is the best spot for all of the people to give you these unwanted sales pitches and cold calls? I assume LinkedIn is the best spot to find you if somebody wanted to.
I mean, like, let's face it, just do a little.
We know all the same people. I'm fully in your club now.
I know. And so, like, the thing of it is, it's just like, hey, I know Daniel. I know, so-and-so. I see that you're connected with such and such.
Don't say that. I don't want people using my good name to slide into your DMs, You could
rat me out.
I was going to say, if you're listening to this, reference someone. Just reference the podcast. I'm giving everybody an easy in. I heard you on the podcast and I want to sell you something. That's the easiest thing.
Right.
But no, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, if you think of anybody inspirational, I want to hear it.
It's you. It's all you.
Oh, perfect. Let's go with that. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit youshouldtalkto.com for more information.